So I'm thinking that many of you have noticed lately what I've been noticing. All of the people in this nice weather running down the side of the road, or they're on their bikes, bicycling for exercise or training for something or other. We know that these are the serious athletes because the people who started it in January for a New Year's resolution, they quit. So these are all the people that are taking their training seriously. And so I thought, it's good exercise, and there's something to that, and my husband runs, and so I thought, well, we can run together eventually. And so I thought I would try running again. And I say again because any of you that were at Grace 2 years ago knows what happened the first time. I ended up on crutches because I broke something. Didn't go well. But there was somebody else who upped me one, so we're good. So I decided to run again. And, I did what most people do nowadays when you want to learn how to do it right. I downloaded the app for it. And so I have the Couch to 5K app. Don't laugh, it's true. And it is helpful because, there's timing and everything. But what I started to realize, again, all over again, running does not come naturally. It just doesn't. Now, maybe when I was a kid, running around when I was 5, that's one thing. But this whole 5K thing, it's just not happening naturally. I have to really think about it. I have to work at this. The second thing I discovered is that, there are some rules to running. Now, you may not think about, there's rules in sports, like how you get along with one another, and there's rules in running, too. You're supposed to run on the left side of the road facing the traffic and all of that kind of stuff. But there's some other rules that we don't think about too often in running. Some of them are for 5K kind of running, some of them are for marathon running, but there's a few general ones, like don't try it in heels. Okay, there's commercials out there that will tell you women can run in heels, and I'm telling you it's a really bad idea. Don't do it. The other thing, there's how you run, your stride. Right? It's a little different for everybody, whether you put your heel down first, your toe down first, and all of that kind of stuff. You kind of have to, there's a rule, sort of, but you kind of have to figure it out for yourself, right? Breathing with your diaphragm. Most of us don't even think about how we breathe anymore, but if you're a runner or any kind of athlete, you probably have to relearn how to breathe again. So I had to think about all of these rules in order to start running. And I had to do what does not come naturally. And I'll just admit right up front, I'm not there yet. Pastor Jim spoke last week in his message about how he answers the question, why join the church? Why join the church? Well, and this is kind of a part 2. This is my 2 cents. We join the church because it's only in the church that we learn how to become true followers of Jesus Christ. He said last week that there's something here that we don't get anywhere else, and I think we can agree with that, but this is also the only place where we get the training that we need. This is our training ground for the Christian life. Now, you might think about, well, what does that mean? Training ground. We know that we need to be trained in this Christian life and to follow Jesus, but what does that mean? What does that look like? We kind of agree that there is more to life than what we normally perceive in our day-to-day existence with our 5 senses. There's something there, or we probably wouldn't be here this morning. And there's something to be said for community, for coming together in this way, because otherwise we wouldn't be here and Jesus would not have started this whole church thing in the first place. So there's something to this community idea, to this whole church thing. God has a plan for my life, and God has a plan for your life, and God has a plan for our life together. Now, if you're like me, sometimes when you hear somebody say that, you're like, yeah, I know, but right now, the plan stinks. It's not going so well, right? But we have to take a step back and look at the bigger picture. It's not about what's happening to us right now, right here. We're all part of this plan that all creation is moving toward. If we look at the big picture, we and all of creation are heading somewhere. somewhere wonderful, somewhere beyond our imagination, somewhere where we who follow in Christ's way become fully human, fully healed, where we work and we play in deeply meaningful ways using our God-given gifts and talents. Life is going somewhere. Life has a point. And all of the world's major religions agree on that. What is our goal? What is our point? When we look at the grand sweep of the Bible story, of our story, we see that God created us to be rulers and priests. Now, we've fallen away from that. It's become distorted through sin, but God, through Jesus Christ, is even now at this moment working to restore us to God's image, to make us into those rulers and priests that we were created to be. That's our goal. That's God's plan. Our goal is to become fully human, to look like Jesus, who was fully human, what we were meant to be. And that includes mind, body, heart, soul. That's what salvation looks like. It's being fully healed, fully restored to the image of God as we were created to be. It's not just about going to heaven someday, as nice as that will be. It's about restoring and redeeming all of creation. It's becoming citizens of the new Jerusalem, citizens with privileges and responsibilities. You know, we start way back at the beginning. God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over the livestock and all the wild animals and over the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it." We are created to be rulers, not in the sense of exploiting and doing whatever we want with creation, but being good stewards, taking care of and blessing and loving the creation that we have been given. So that's the beginning. And if you go all the way to the end, to Revelation 21, we see the return of God, a new heaven and a new earth, which I don't believe is something completely separate. It's this earth, this heaven, redeemed, renewed, restored. And the writer, John, says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and there was no longer any sea. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride beautifully dressed for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, 'Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God.'" Priests in this new Jerusalem, bringing the nations to God and bringing God to the nations. That is our goal. That is our future. That's all that's included, and there's so much more. But you don't have 2 hours this morning for me to go on and on about it. I want to give you a glimpse of where we're headed and what we need to think about to get there. What we do now, why we join the church, how we live our lives, all of those things matter because we are preparing now for the life that is to come. We're a part of that redemption right now. We are rulers and priests in part now, following the one who leads us, our high priest, our King of Kings, Jesus Christ. Now, we know that we can't do this by works, or at least we should know that we can't do it by works. It's not by our works that we bring about this salvation, this redemption, but by our working alongside with God, by following God, by obeying God. How do we do that? What does that look like? We all come up with different answers, don't we? There's two kind of popular answers right now that we tend to go to. And one is following a list of rules. Who likes rules? Okay, Who really would rather follow rules but won't admit to it because rules are easier to follow? Isn't it? If somebody gives you a list of rules, you can do this, this, and this, but you can't do this, it just makes our day easier, right? Well, we kind of have a list of rules, but Jesus said that the top two were love the Lord your God with all your soul, strength, heart, and mind. Anybody got that one down? Yeah. Love your neighbors yourself? Yeah. So, that one's kind of tough. And then, okay, so we back off that one. What about the Beatitudes? Anybody got those down yet? Maybe one. Maybe. 10 Commandments? Okay, that's a little easier. The 10 Commandments we can mostly do, except for the last one about bearing false witness. I tell white lies all the time, just to save people's feelings. So maybe that balances it out. I don't know. But there's got to be more, right, than just a list of rules. There's got to be more. In Luke 18, the rich young ruler comes to Jesus and he says, well, how can I be saved? And Jesus says, well, follow the 10 Commandments, basically. And the rich young ruler says, well, I've done that since I was a boy. I got that one down. There's more to it than following the rules. Jesus says, go and sell your possessions, sell all that you have, and come follow me. And we know that the rich young ruler can't follow that rule, if it is a rule. There's more than following the rules, but the rules are important. How many of you remember the Captain Sullenberger in Flight 1549 that landed in the Hudson River? There's the story of what he did is just absolutely amazing. For those of you that might not remember the story, it was 2009, and just minutes after takeoff, the plane ran into a flock of Canada geese. And most of us know that birds and airplanes don't really mix very well. They lost the engines, and Captain Sullenberger had just seconds to figure out what to do to save all the lives that he possibly could. Now, Captain Sullenberger probably had all kinds of rules running around in his head. There's rules about how to fly the airplane, about safety, about what to do if you run into a flock of geese. I'm not sure if that one was in there, but maybe. How to land a plane on water, all of those kind of things. But there were probably two rules in his head that he had to figure out how to obey. One, don't crash land where there's people. And two, save all the passengers you can. And it looked like in that instance, he was going to have to choose one rule or the other. Fortunately, he had internalized all of the things that he needed to know, how to fly the plane, how to land on water, all of those things. And he managed to fulfill both of those, not break either one of those rules. And he landed safely on the Hudson River with no loss of life. What would you do if you were in his situation? He didn't have time to check the rule book to see what the appropriate thing was to do. He didn't have time to think about the rules. He had internalized them so that he knew, without even thinking, what the best thing to do was, and thank God that he did. Now, we have rules for very good reasons, how to do things and rules to keep people safe, expectations for the good of ourselves and for others. We find that God did something along the same lines. God gave the Israelites the law for their good, for the good of others, but also as something to show who God is, so that we not just worry about a list of do's and don'ts, but to really look at these laws and say, I'm doing this because this is who God is, and I want to be like God. I want to be one of those people that reflects the image of God. And so we're given the rules. The rules are important, but we're not given the rules to check them off the list. We're given the rules to understand who we are and whose we are, to internalize them and understand them until they become habits of heart and mind that we don't even have to think about anymore. The other way we go, if we don't really like rules, that we want to rebel against the rules, which is what my generation is all about, we go the other way and say, well, once I follow Jesus, all that sin stuff is going to be taken care of, and I should just be my natural, authentic self. Just like running a 5K is not natural for me, some of this following Jesus stuff is not natural for me either. God created us wonderfully. And God said that creation was good, and that includes us. But we have this little event in Genesis 2 and 3 where sin entered into the world. Jesus says to his disciples, they're having a run-in in Matthew 15. They're having a run-in with the Pharisees and arguing about the disciples eating with unclean hands and how that makes the disciples unclean according to Jewish law. And Jesus says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of a person's mouth come out of the heart, and these defile them. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. These are what defile a person. Eating with unwashed hands does not defile them. You know, Jesus sometimes had some hard words for us, didn't he? You know, as we read through the Gospels, Jesus seems to have recognized that we're all flawed in some ways, that our hearts, our natural, authentic selves, are inclined to evil. That is, being in control of our own lives, of putting our own desires above God's will. You know, this whole obedience thing, submission to God's will, taking up your cross and following Jesus, these are not natural to us in our fallen state. I'll give you another little example. Some of you might know that I have a slight problem with chocolate chip cookies. You know, if there's a chocolate chip cookie anywhere within 100 yards, I will find it and find a reason to eat it. That's my natural, authentic self. I love chocolate chip cookies and they make me feel good. But they may not always be that good for me if I let that natural, authentic part of myself indulge. My mother and her brother both have type 2 diabetes, following a lifetime filled with desserts after every dinner. That natural, authentic part of myself may not be the most helpful thing for me. I need to think about what's coming out of my heart, what my natural self is telling me to do, and put that in contrast to what God is telling me to do. And then follow God's way, not my way. God has created us to be rulers and priests, and we need to understand what God is calling us to and who God is calling us to be in order to fulfill that mission here and now, and then in the New Jerusalem, in the life to come. We are in training here and now. We need to develop those habits of head and heart and hand, or thoughts and feelings and actions. And the way we do that is by looking at those rules and internalizing them, understanding what's important and what God wants us to understand from those rules. And by looking at our natural self in the light of Jesus, by the power of the Holy Spirit. Is this who I'm meant to be? Or is this something that needs to go so I can be who I was truly meant to be? You know, just like starting up a 5K, it's hard work. It's really hard work. It's like building any new muscle. And sometimes not only do we not appreciate it, but it's not appreciated by the people around us either. I was listening to Connie play He Leadeth Me, and then she went into that minor key. Sometimes where God leads us is not the most comfortable place to be. Sometimes it's hard. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't feel right. Paul says in Romans 5 that we glory in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame because God's love has been poured out in our hearts through the Holy Spirit who's been given to us. What does that have to do with the church? This is your training ground. Each one of you is a coach, and each one of you is a trainee, training for the life to come. And just like I showed the kids with the marigolds, we are seeds that God has planted here, that we come here to be watered, to be nurtured, to get our sunlight, and we spread. We share seeds everywhere we go. May we share and bring others into this training ground with us.